So my name is Alex Hamilton. I'm a Penn State Scranton alumni. I graduated last spring on an IST major, design development path. And I work full-time now as a software engineer at Lowe's. Yeah, I got the job right after I graduated. I moved kind of temporarily to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where the Lowe's, they just opened a big tech hub. So I was working from the tech hub for a little bit, then I was fully virtual, so I decided to move back home to save money on apartments, things like that. So the path to get, I think, a good career in IST, or really any, I guess, good career nowadays, is I'm kind of the belief anymore that doing well in school and getting through school is kind of just a way to get your foot in the door. I think nowadays it's more about kind of how do you stand out, because there's so many people going for these positions. It's so much more competitive than ever before. If you want to get a good position, a good full-time position right out of college, I think you really need to kind of go a little bit more above and beyond. So doing online classes is a big one. So I personally like Udemy's online classes. So they have their classes, you do have to buy them, but they're not normally more than $10. So it's like $10 for like I don't even know, like 60 or 70 hour video course, and there's coding challenges in there and things like that. That's a big way. And when I point that out in interviews, businesses really like that you kind of went above and beyond, took more kind of initiative of your education. And another way is doing personal projects and things like that. I know Parkson is I know he was telling me about some of his personal projects and things like that, but doing personal projects, even if you're just somewhat interested about something, even if it's vaguely related to IST, whether it's coding, kind of server related things, whatever, really, it's doing personal projects really make you stand out. And especially if you do stuff like putting your code out there on GitHub and things like that, that's really good. And kind of the last point of advice I had here was making a LinkedIn and growing a network. I know one of the IC class, I think, almost makes you make one or something, if I remember correctly. In terms of posting, I'm not the best at doing that, but I would recommend posting, if you're doing personal projects. I do know if you graduate from like a LinkedIn learning class or like a Udemy class, I know you could share that. I've done that a couple times with Udemy classes, but it just shows whoever you're connected with. If you're connected with, a potential employer, employee, things like that, they'll see that and they'll kind of take note of that. And if they see you in an interview, it might ring a bell. So that's another way to kind of get your foot in the door.
So do you want to describe what you do at a day of work or a week of work at Lowe's? You're as an assistant programmer, right? So what is your title?
So my actual title is associate software engineer. Right. It's basically just like a junior software engineer type position type thing. So kind of a day in the life of that position. It kind of looks like it is an 8 to 5, but it's more lenient because it's virtual. What we utilize is called Scrum. I think they talk about that a little bit in some of the classes, but it's a Scrum team. So basically it revolves around giving stories, which are tasks, to the developers, and there's a certain estimated length of time they expect them to take, things like that. It could go a little over, but obviously, if they give you an estimated amount of time, they would like it done by then. But it's the day kind of, some days are more slow, some days are more hectic, determined by if there's bugs or things like that. Obviously, that's very urgent. So that's kind of, if there's multiple bugs throughout the day, it's going to be a hectic day. But a more traditional day is just kind of you're working on your own task. You have some meetings. It's a lot less of a hard 8 to 5 than a lot of other jobs are. Because you can work, if you want to take a 30-minute break just in the middle of the day, then you can do that. I mean, kind of the expectation is you'll pick up that 30 minutes somewhere else.
How'd you go about finding an internship?
Definitely attend the career fairs if you need an internship and things like that. I didn't go after that one because they offered me a position at the end of the internship. So I didn't go to any more career fairs. I do kind of regret that, though, because it's always good to keep your options open, things like that. But my suggestion would be to attend as many of those career fairs as you can. And LinkedIn is also a good place to find internships and things like that. I know there's like a search for like jobs or something like that. I know you can search for internships there. And I know it comes up with a bunch of local companies and things like that. And you can kind of use keywords to find the exact position you're looking for and things like that. So since there's a lot of cybersecurity people in the room and stuff like that, you could search cybersecurity internship, Scranton, Pennsylvania. and there's like a job. I don't remember the exact name of like the search button, but I think it was like job search or something on LinkedIn. If you look up job search LinkedIn, it should probably come up. But I do know I've looked at things. I used to look at that in conjunction kind of with the career fair. And they normally link you straight to the application.
What did you have in your resume that got you hired or offered at multiple places from a career fair?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Udemy, I do know that was a big one. And the fact that I had multiple kind of, like I said, the Kotlin and the Java and things like that. Penn State also, I mean, I guess it was because it was at the Penn State Career Fair, but they really seemed to be impressed and kind of, I guess, intrigued by Penn State's education system specifically. I do know they spoke highly of Penn State and things like that, the recruiters that were at these career fairs and things like that. Make sure that you talk about and kind of use buzzwords and keywords of technical words and things like that. Like languages, like Java, things like that, methods, classes. So, resume specifically, though, I would probably say extracurriculars also are good to show that you have a personality. I do know, yeah, so I play the violin. So I had that I was in the band here, and they really liked that. And, I remember the Lowe's recruiter specifically he played an instrument too or something, but it just gives you something to bond about in interviews with the person themselves, that to show that you're not just this emotionless, person with all these accolades with technical things. It's also important to show you're a genuine person, things like that. So having extracurriculars, technical related things, I do know putting your best projects, whether it's from school or personal projects, are also really important.
What are the benefits of working remote versus actually being there physically?
Yeah. The benefits is you'll basically always have someone right there you can ask questions to, things like that. Whereas if you're virtual, you do have people you can ask questions to, but you'll send them a message, and sometimes it might take them an hour or so to get back, some time, things like that, because they're either busy or not at their computer or things like that. So as far as response time, I would say that's the biggest advantage of being physical there. Also, I guess the interaction of it, definitely, you're next to your peers. You can ask them a question. Oh, how does this code look? How does this, whatever look? And you kind of can do the same for them. If you can't hold yourself accountable to be working and stuff like that, I would try to be physical, because it's much more easy for you to, mentally keep yourself. Because the biggest thing with working virtually is you need to know, even if you're at home, you're at work. That's the biggest thing with working virtually. But as far as pros and cons, I mean, I would mainly just say interaction, response speed, because when you're in person, it's instant. Cost is the reason why I'm virtual, just because.
How much did it cost to be down there?
Yeah, so my rent in Charlotte was about $5,000 a month, so it was really expensive. Yeah, Charlotte is a really big tech, I guess, kind of capital at this point. I mean, a lot of companies are moving to Charlotte and things like that, and Lowe's specifically, like I said, just opened I don't even know how big tech hub. It's like one of the biggest buildings in Charlotte, and you just see the big Lowe's sign at the top. It's a cool building, and you miss out on all that. So it's like you really have to value the pros and cons personally, I would say.
How has the company built you up, onboarded you, and trained you? And has it stopped? Was it the first few months? What is it?
Yeah.
Like?
So the first 3 months, which is when I was in person, was a coding boot camp. So I was given tasks. They did kind of start from the ground up, though. So a lot of companies, when they onboard you and things like that, they're not going to expect you to know everything. I mean, they're going to expect you to have a foundation, but and things like Lowe's was really good about this, and the coding boot camp and things like that. People would ask questions that people might be embarrassed to ask and things like that. But Lowe's was very good at comforting them and saying, it's really okay. That's what this boot camp's for. I can't speak so much for other companies in terms of how they onboard, but like I said, Lowe's was a 3-month boot camp. At the end, you had to do a presentation of a project you made. My project was you had to make the back end and the front end. It was like a movie, kind of like Netflix type thing, where you'd click it and it would show details about the movie. You couldn't watch the movie, obviously, but it would give you a link to the movie and a bunch of visuals and things like that. But yeah, kind of like a for fun project type thing. And they make you do the front end and the back end to make sure you're well rounded. I do full back end now. I like back end a lot more than the front end, but yeah.
Do you want to explain that what the difference is?
So the difference between back end and front end, back end's a lot more of the logic and the I mean, front end has some problem solving and stuff like that too, but back end's a lot more of the logic and kind of, I'm trying to think of the best word. I guess logic is probably the best way I could describe it, like the kind of the brains of the system, whereas the front end's kind of the outside of the system. So what the customer sees. So back end is rarely, the customers, they'll never see the back end. They'll see the front end though, at Lowe's, it's the, the cashier, the self-checkout machines, things like that. But the back end is kind of the logic behind it. How do you calculate the tax? How do you calculate the, whatever.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years then, like in the company, I guess?
Yeah, so I do know Lowe's has like I said, I'm kind of getting close to becoming a software engineer. So the way that kind of associate software engineer's path works at Lowe's, and this is probably similar to a lot of companies. So there's 3-month boot camp. There is 2 6-month rotations. And then after that, you're a software engineer. So you get naturally promoted. And there's, benefits with that and things like that. And then I don't know how the next step would be senior software engineer. I don't know if it's a time thing or if it's a, success thing. That I don't know yet. But I have kind of a clear path to, my next position. So, I love everything really about the job, to be honest. I don't have really anything bad to say, to be honest.
All right, so switching back to the school side of it a little bit, because it's more relatable to all of us, I think. What would you, if you had the chance to redo / change anything in your college career, what would it be?
I would definitely do more personal projects. That's kind of, coming back to my advice earlier. GitHub is another thing I wish I did more of. I did it a little bit my senior year. That's really the only time I did GitHub. So GitHub, it wasn't something that helped me get my job because I already had my job the end of junior year. So, but I wish I did more with that because, Lowe's and all other companies, they use version control systems like GitHub, things like that. So getting comfortable with that and getting experience and proving you can work with it already, that's something I kind of had to get more in depth with at Lowe's. That was probably the biggest learning curve for me. So that's a big one, technically wise.
Would you have wanted to get more involved, or say you would have led a club or just been in more
Yeah,
clubs?
I do wish I was able to do more clubs. I mean, and COVID was a couple of the years, but I wish I was able to do more with the IST club and things like that. Like I said, I was technically in the club, but they met during hours I couldn't go. So ironically enough, companies, if there's someone who's well-rounded and, talented and skilled enough for the position, they're going to take that person over someone who's more skilled but not well-rounded. Because the thing is if you're well-rounded, it proves you can adapt to different positions, you can adapt to you're more flexible.
How do you fit into your job's or group's culture?
My team does a good job at keeping things casual. You'll laugh a lot in meetings. My team is kind of rarely serious. They have their moments where they're serious, but I would say my team is definitely very, personable and things like that, and it's easy to get along with. Yeah.
So I have created several JavaScript and Python programs.
Yeah.
Or coding, if you will. Would I include those within my resume because they are personal projects, or is that something that's not looked upon?
If you have a ton of personal projects, I would say pick your top maybe 5, 3 to 5. And as, you continue developing things and they get more complex, more impressive, more things like that, I would say, then maybe keep these ones, still keep them, but, and you can reference them in verbal interviews and things like that. But I would say on your paper and, digital page resume, I would say keep your 3 to 5 biggest ones, and you can keep rotating them out. Whatever kind of, even if you're applying for different positions, like I said, if you're applying for a Python position, then keep your Python ones there when you submit your resume. So I never actually coded until I came to Penn State. I didn't take any coding in college, or in high school rather, and things like that. So my first project was just it was a Spring Boot project. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a framework for applications. It kind of does a lot of the back end code for you and things like that. So Spring Boot, you can generate a project online. You can kind of structure it and make the skeleton of what you want it to be. My first project was, like I said, it's all kind of personal. I actually made a project to keep track of my statistics while playing a game. So how many times I'd win, how many times I'd lose, with certain kind of variables in there. So that was kind of one of my first projects, and it just kind of, it was something, I mean, I still personally use it. So, it's like, it kind of helps keep track of percentages, kind of puts numbers to it.
Which class helped you the most that you took here?
So it was one where you create a point of service system where it's like, I created like a fast food type system. You had to code the back end and you had to code the GUI in the front. And it was a full, that was the class that developing that because that's similar to what you do in the real world. You're with your team, and I remember those classes. I think she very rarely lectured. I think it was a couple times, but she very rarely lectured, and it was, you just met with your team during class time. That's the most applicable you can get to a real job.
Do you have any good questions that you ask at the end of an interview, like you ask the employer?
A really good question to ask is, what does the day-to-day look like? Like, what does a day in the life of whatever position, whatever kind of internship you're going into look like? Because, the interviewer and stuff like that, the recruiter, they'll be like, oh, it's an 8 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever. And, you'll be doing this, you'll be doing that, you'll be meeting these people, you'll have these meetings, whatever, they describe it. But that is, and it shows you really care. It shows you're really interested in the position. That's a really good question to ask. That's probably the best question you could ask. But also anything just anything, I guess, you're interested about. What languages do you use? By that point, you might already know that. But, it kind of depends, I guess, on the position. But definitely ask what the day-to-day life looks like. Because that will give you, one, a really good idea of what you're getting yourself into. But two, it really shows you're interested in, invested in it.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I think that's we'll close it here because it's been about an hour. So
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you for coming. Yeah, you want to talk to him?